Hello and welcome to the Dental Chair. I am your host, Marguerite Morgan. I am the founder and director of Irish Dental Jobs. With 25 years recruitment experience in the legal and dental arena, I tend to do things very differently, and I wanted to showcase how we establish and maintain relationships to match the right people to dental practices nationwide. Over the course of the next 8 episodes, we will discuss a couple of key insights from our recently launched salary guide and dental insights and trends. And to discuss these with me, to my right, is my right-hand woman, Margaret Kierans. Margaret has been working with me for the last 6 years as the marketing manager at Irish Dental Jobs, and she's also the master behind the dental insights and trends. So Margaret, what insights have you got for me today?
Since it's our final episode, Marguerite, I am going to talk about real data from our salary guide. I haven't touched on the actual salaries just yet. So just to add a bit of context, our last salary guide was published in 2020, which was 4 years ago, pre-COVID, because it was created the end of 2019 and published the start of 2020. So I used our last salary guide as a useful benchmark to look at our to assess salaries between 2020 and 2024, our new salary guide. And we haven't really seen a reason to publish a new salary guide since 2020.
No, there was no reason, like there was no real shift in salaries unless we see a new trend or a new shift. That's the only time, we would call our clients and maybe advise them that things have slightly changed, and in this case, in November 2022, we certainly saw a shift, and that definitely triggered the salary guide for 2024 to be established. Now, it was meant to be launched in 2024, but we got more involved in it this time, hence the Dental Insights and Trends brochure as well.
Yeah.
So it'll cover 2024 and 2025.
Yeah, it did. It took a little bit longer than we expected.
Yeah.
We started off with just the salaries, and then it just grew. It just
grew.
grew legs,
Yeah.
and we have 20 pages in our salary guide of insights and data and research, and then we have 20 pages in our insights and trends, brochure. So it's 40 pages of hard data.
And I said it at the beginning, like a lot of work, was put into it. And if nobody else is proud, like I'm very proud of what the end product. Of the end product and the work,
definitely
we invested
so much
into
research went into it. But
so
look,
you have a job for 2025,
great,
Margaret.
Good to know. So to get back to the figures, it was the economy that pushed us to do it. It was COVID and it was inflation. It was the whole market that did push us to publicise it as well. So just to add another bit of context to inflation for people who don't really know, I looked at inflation from 2009, from when we opened, and the average annual inflation rate was 1%. So if you look at between 2020 and 2024, it increased 18.5. So that's, to look at the average of 1% each year to increase in over 4 years to 18.5 is quite an historic increase in inflation. So salaries and inflation go hand in hand. Prices of things go up, your salary has to also go up with that. Otherwise, your purchasing power, you don't have any, So when I looked at inflation and I looked at our 2020 salary guide, I did a comparative analysis. So I did salaries in 2020, salaries in 2024, inflation, and then I did the calculation as to how much of a real increase they have actually seen based on the price of things going up. So if you take newly qualified dental nurses as the first example, in 2020 they were earning €13 per hour. But if you look at our 2024 salary guide, they are now earning €15 per hour. So that's a €2 increase per hour, which is 12.5 of an overall increase. But when you look at inflation and the price of things going up, they actually are in a salary deficit of 6%. So they have no purchasing power. There is no real wage increase, even though an increase is a positive thing. So their increase only holds value if they can purchase more with it. So hygienists were earning €35 per hour in 2020, and in 2024 they were earning €60 per hour. And that's an increase of 42.8%. A newly qualified dental associate in 2020 was on a 40% split, and in 2024 they were on a 50% split.
And just on that now, when you say 50% split, it doesn't mean that, you know, that's what you have to offer.
No.
It's just that since November 2022 as well. But look, for 9 years, ever since when I set up in 2009, the whole economy crashed. And for 8 or 9 years, certainly, you know, a dental associate, if you're hired on a self-employed basis, it was 40%. Yeah. And then after 7 to 9 years was a slight shift to 45%. So what we've been experiencing, certainly for the last 2 years for a dentist, is that whether they've 0 experience or 10 years experience, it's becoming increasingly challenging to place a dentist at anything less than 50%. So we would always advise 45% split for a certain amount of experience, and for 50% split you would have to have, you know, maybe, you know, 3+ years experience. But that is challenging because the majority of dentists, whether they've 0 experience or they've 10 years experience, when they come to us, it's 50%. Now, we do try and advise as much as we can. So, but that's the difference, you know. So when, you know, what we have in the salary guide, that there is a jump, we're not saying that that's what you have to place a dentist at. It's becoming more challenging. And if you want to find the right people for the long term, you know, this is more than likely what they're going to be available at.
Yeah, no, there's different things to consider as well. But for dental associates, hygienists and nurses, out of those 3 disciplines, it was the dental hygienist that actually had the highest increase in salary and had the higher real wage increase of 24%, which is a fantastic increase when you compare it to inflation. So if you're given these figures, practice owners really should be offering competitive salaries. As I said before in our last podcast, support staff particularly could have 10 job offers all at the same time. So if you are a practice owner and you're not offering, you know, benefits or better terms or these salaries, your competitors will be, and you could be losing good solid candidates just down to not keeping up with these salaries.
But the other thing is, and I think we said it through all the podcasts, it's all about retaining your staff.
Yeah.
So the whole idea about the salary guide, it is a guide, and you can't go wrong. If you offer support staff or professional staff the figures that we have in our salary guide based on their experience, you can't really go wrong, because you have a better chance of finding the right people for the long term. But most importantly is that you're leaving yourself you know, open. There's no room for persuasion based on these salaries, because there is a lot of persuasion at the moment. Like you said, if we're dealing with especially support staff, if they're not familiar with us, with Irish Dental Jobs, if it's their first time working with us, they have 9 to 11 job offers.
Yeah.
And a lot of times the salaries that are being offered are a lot higher than in our guide. And what we've experienced, and this is what triggered the whole salary guide off, was that, you know, it started with 1, 2, 3 job offers that none of them were being accepted, because no matter what we did at the beginning with regards to addressing salaries and what if you're counter offered and everything like that, as soon as it came to the job offer, everything would change with regards to salaries. And then all of a sudden the salary expectation was a lot higher, and it wasn't by €1 or €2 an hour, you know, it was by €3 or €4 an hour, and these salaries none of our clients could compete with. So that's another thing that we were certainly up against, was dental professionals being counter offered in their current employment, but what they were being counter offered to our clients certainly couldn't match. So and it's just like, I'll go back to it again, when it comes to salaries, it's, you know, people's salaries should be based on their skill set and their experience and what the current climate is offering.
Definitely. But salaries have definitely increased in dental. But when you take a look at the economy and compare it to the salary increase, they really haven't seen. It's kind of just maintained itself. So anyway, to end our final episode of the season, I just want to say a huge, huge thank you to everybody who has bought our salary guide and the positive feedback we have got. It was over and above. We didn't expect all the positive feedback we have received. So a big thank you. A big thank you to those who have interacted with our podcasts online, all the words of encouragement and support, because this has really been out of my comfort zone and Marguerite's comfort zone. So a huge thank you to you all. And to those who haven't already bought our salary guide and are interested, we do have a few hard copies left. So if you do want to purchase, you can do so at irishdentaljobs.ie/salary guide.
And now, on this week's episode of The Dental Chair, we are honoured to welcome a true leader in the dental profession. She is a well-respected authority and our national expert in clinical regulations and statutory guidelines. It is my pleasure to welcome Dr. Jane Renahan. Jane, thank you very much for joining me on The Dental Chair, and it's an absolute pleasure to finally meet you. For many years now, I've heard exceptional feedback about you and your work from practice owners, dentists, and most recently as well from support staff. And what I've gathered, it seems that having your guidance is invaluable for every dental practice who want to stay current with dental compliance and regulations. So for our listeners, you might tell me a little more about your background and how you became involved with clinical regulations and statutory guidelines.
I'm a dentist, qualified, I won't tell you how many years ago, but I've always worked in the public sector. And that's mostly working with children, working with special care patients. And after a number of years, I moved into the management side of things. And that's where I really found my niche. But I kind of tumbled into training, and starting with dental nurse training. I was the tutor for dental nurse training in the old Eastern Health Board. Now, that's how far back it goes. I really loved training dental nurses. And the thing about dental nurses is they pin you to the wall. If they ask you a question, you better know the answer. Later in my career, I went on to training dentists when I worked in the dental hospital, and I was there for a full 5 years as a lecturer in public dental health. You can kind of bluff yourself a little bit in a scientific way when you're talking to dental students. On the one hand, this, on the one hand, that. But dental nurses are a hard gig when you come to train them. So I've continued the dental nurse training element. And when I eventually went on to be a principal dental surgeon, I felt that training all of my staff was key. I was very fortunate also to be involved in the political side of things. I was involved in the Irish Dental Association, giving lectures, helping the Quality and Patient Safety Committee to develop standards. And it was an area that I really, really loved. But I continued with the training. And when I finished with the health service, and about 7 years ago, I took semi-retirement, left the health service. I had seen over the period of about 30 years that dentists in dental practice needed support. Dental staff needed support. And they needed support in their practice, in their specific area. Because if you attend a lecture and there's 100, 150 people in the room, yes, you're going to get the basic principles. But how does that work in your practice? With the equipment you have, with the kind of staff you have, with the patient population that you've got coming in. So I decided to set up my company, Dental Compliance. And I should also say my husband is with me, although I tend to be the front end, a bit like you. You're the front end of Irish Dental Jobs. I'm the front end, the brand of Dental Compliance. But my husband is key. He's in the background. Derek is a trained scenes of crime investigator with a career in the military police. And that pushed him into military law, preparing cases for the military courts. And then when he took retirement from there, he started working in the health service. Derek worked in one of the large hospitals in Dublin, getting them ready for the initial HICRA inspections. He was brought in. It was thought at the time that his military training would help him to boss people around. But Derek knows in a leadership role, bossing people around gets you absolutely nowhere. Shouting at people, telling people what to do is of no value. You train them, you empower them, you bring them with you, you listen to them. Your staff know more than you do normally. listen to them, consult with them. So when he was working in this large hospital, getting them ready for the HICRA hygiene inspections and getting the environment, getting the laundry, getting the staff prepared for the inspectors to come in to ask questions, he empowered them. He finished with a health service about the same time as me, and we moved to Wexford and we've set up the company Dental Compliance. And it's been great working with him because I talk to my dentists, I prepare reports, he then looks at the reports, he gets the accuracy of the reports correct. And I talked a lot about that, but you're getting a feel of what we've been doing. And I think we're a unique couple. Dental Compliance is unique. I'm the dentist, but he will get you ready for the regulator. He's got that eye. You know, we often walk out of practice. He said, "Jane, did you see that?" I said, "I actually missed it." So he's the hidden gem that gives us that edge.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to credit him also. But I'm enjoying what I'm doing. I love what I'm doing. I love helping dentists. I love helping dental teams. I love meeting people who are committed to what they're doing. I think you're the same. I think you like commitment. Commitment is the passion. It's the currency that we work with. Commitment is what gets things done. And I enjoy working with committed clients.
Yeah, and in your role as you've certainly earned your stripes as the national expert in dental compliance and statutory regulations. Are there any big challenges you face, or?
Every practice has their own challenge. So if we look at the practice, get down to the granular level of each practice, you get small practices, you get large group practices, work with corporates also, and they're all going to be very, very different. And it's them recognising that they're different. I mean, what's the definition of compliance? It's identifying your risk and managing your risk. The challenges for each practice is to know what their risk is. Practices are so busy. Isn't it great to be busy? Isn't it great to have your books full, to be booked 4 months, 6 months in advance? But you can easily forget those things that maybe you don't want to do.
Yeah.
And for many dentists, they love their dentistry. They want to do their dentistry. They want to upskill. They're doing courses. They're buying new equipment. They're advancing their surgeries. They're refurbishing. They're building. But don't forget what you need to do, and you need to do your compliance, and you need to build it into what you're doing. And that's a challenge that I have to help practices with, support and advise them on that.
Because we were having you on one of our episodes, we went to some of our clients, we went to some job seekers, and we have a couple of questions for you if you don't mind.
Go for it.
So let me see. What are some common misconceptions about compliance in the dental industry?
Okay, the biggest common misconception I come across is I'll get a phone call from a potential new client, somebody who wants to start working with me. And usually the first thing they say is, "I want to be 100% compliant." You're never 100% compliant. And there's a misconception that if you engage in compliance, that you'll become compliant and you can forget about it then. You've got it done. You get the paperwork, you get the training, that's it, it's done. What should you understand by compliance? You should understand it's built into everything you do every day. It's built into what everybody does, that everybody knows their roles. They know their responsibility. It's that challenge of understanding it's a cultural function within your organisation. In the same way as your staff understand the dentistry, they understand the education, the hygiene, they've got to understand what their role in compliance is. So the biggest challenge is to say to a prospective new client, this is not a place you're going to arrive. You're never going to get 100% compliant. This is a journey that you're starting on, and don't expect it to happen in a week or 2 weeks. You've got to build to it. It's a cycle. And don't get disconcerted by the fact that you'll have gaps, that you'll get times you're very, very busy, or you lose staff and you might miss out on it for a little while, but then you've got to go pick it up again. So it's that mindset. The challenge is the mindset to build it in.
Yeah. And from your experience, what are the most important things dental professionals need to keep in mind to stay compliant?
Training and documentation and communication. Training your staff, talking to one another. In-house training is so valuable. Everybody thinks when you say training, oh, it's I'll book them in on a course here, or I'll get an expert in to talk to them. And I'm delighted. Look, I go into practices all the time. There's my pitch. I go into practices all the time. But everybody should be able to carry out education. If I'm a dental nurse and I'm the one who works the autoclave, I should be the one to train the new dentist coming in at their induction. This is how the autoclave works. This is what I, as a dental nurse, expect you to deliver the instruments to me as I put them into the autoclave. Everybody has their role, and education should be simple. Do a 5-minute, 10-minute session once a week. Do a stand-up session on a Monday morning. Group huddle. Right, we're doing hand hygiene today. We're doing contact points for cleaning another day. We're doing dental unit water lines. 5,
and
10
you find
minutes
the practice
chat.
owners are open to that?
Some of them are. Some of them are, that's a great idea, but I'm too busy. I think, of course you're too busy. I don't want you to do this. It's not going to be done if you do it. Practice owners are too busy. They're doing the dentistry. But people in your organisation can do it. Yeah. It's this delegation. Dentists are perfectionists. They want everything perfect. And if it's going to be perfect, there's a misconception that they're the ones who should do it. And in fact, hand it off. You've got good staff.
Yeah.
Marguerite has got you good staff. And she continues to get you good staff. Delegate to your staff. Let them make mistakes.
Yeah.
Dental nurses are very, very solution focused.
Yeah.
They can see where there's problems, listen to them, and listen to the responses they come up with. I've one of the services I offer is to go into a practice for a day, and I spend the morning observing what's happening, and spend the afternoon then pointing out perhaps where the gaps are, where they could tidy up, where the inefficiencies are. And I also listen to the staff. It'll usually take place in the waiting room. Empty the waiting room, no patients for the afternoon. We'll sit around the waiting room with the dentist there, the owner. And the staff come up with solutions. I say, perhaps there's a storage problem with the water that you're distilling. And one of the nurses will say, well, if we do this instead. And somebody else said, yeah, we could do that. And why wouldn't I listen to the dental nurses? They're the expert in their equipment. They know the area. My job is just to pull it all together. So when I've spent that afternoon talking to the nurses, I will go away and I'll draft up a policy, because that's one of the things that's actually, and it is a challenge within dental practice, to get your paperwork together. People are really nervous about paperwork. You can keep it simple. If I said to you, how do you make an apple tart? And write it down, you would have, these are the ingredients. I start with this and you work your way through, and this is the result that I expect. That's what a protocol, or that's what a policy is within dentistry. But practices are very nervous about paperwork. Will I get it right? Will I get it wrong? Your dental nurse knows the procedure that she or he, and there are a lot of he's out there at the moment, how they use their autoclave. I'm just sticking on that. How they prepare the instruments, bag the instruments, pop them into the autoclave, and how they make it work and how it comes out the other side. Right, get them to write it down. Yeah. That's a step in that procedure for decontamination. And I help practices, I'll draft up frameworks, and they then should finish them. I'll never get it right. The practice will get it right. And it'll change. In 6 months' time, maybe there's a problem with that autoclave and it's changed and a new autoclave comes on board. You do not need me to come back. I have empowered you. Go on, do it yourself. Use the protocol that I've set up for you. And then get on with it yourself. Yes, if you want me back in 2 or 3 years' time, just to refresh. In the same way as people do their CPR every 2 years. They know it, they have it in their head, but it's good to practice it. And what I do, I think, is facilitating the expertise within the practice to work together, to collaborate. That's compliance. That's identifying their risk, and that's managing their risk.
Very good. Could you highlight some recent changes or updates in clinical regulations that dental professionals should be aware of?
I think the big change, and certainly when I started this business 7 years ago, the regulations were there. Yes, they'll always change, and of course the most recent change would be the 2018-2019 changes to the ionising radiation regulations. But the biggest change is in oversight and inspection. Inspectors are now visiting dental premises in a big way. And one of the problems that dentists have is that There's an inspector for ionising radiation for your patient's safety. There's an inspector for the safety of ionising radiation for your staff. There's the health and safety inspectors who are coming in. And then there are other, far more dentists, unfortunately, are finding themselves in front of dental council. So what's the biggest change? The biggest change is the inspectors are coming in. And because the inspectors are getting familiar with dentistry, they're getting more granular. They're getting into the detail. The inspectors are going back to the office and saying, this is what I saw in a practice today. This is the problems I had. So the next inspector going out will look for that. So the inspectors are talking. The inspectors are learning on the job. Now they're getting smarter. Initially, when HICWA inspectors came into dentistry and started to look at the radiation, they had a hospital mindset because that was their training. Most of them had come up through the hospital side. But no, now they're getting to see dentistry. And they understand the pressures in dentistry. They understand the low risk of exposure to ionising radiation, but they understand the high frequency. Dentists use a lot of x-rays. So that's the change I've seen, the increase in regulation, the increase in the demands the regulators meeting. I mean, only this week I was at a national radiation regulators conference from the Environmental Protection Agency. And I was astonished at the detail. They really have got to know dentists. They know where the problems are and the focus that they're putting on that. Yes, they'll randomly, because they have to randomly select what turn out to be the good practices. And they're seeing very good practice. They're seeing that many, many dentists are doing what's required to be done. But they also know where the weaknesses are. And they're going after them. Because the safety of patients, I mean, you're a patient, I'm a patient.
Yeah.
My family are patients. I want them to be safe. And we should welcome the regulators. We shouldn't see them as a threat.
Yeah.
And they're not a threat unless you're doing something that's unsafe.
What are some of the risks or consequences for dental practices that overlook compliance?
Well, how long do you have? We could be here all day. I read a quote, it was one of these American quotes you find, and it stuck in my head. You think compliance is expensive? Try non-compliance. I work with some very, very good clients. I love working with people who are committed. But there's that group of people who ring me. I mean, recently I had a practice who rang me that had just had their second HICWA inspection. They ignored the report from the first HICWA inspection. They felt, that's it. They put their head in the sand and they got back to doing the dentistry. But HICWA were back again. And the next time they were not happy. And this practice now has been told that they can't use certain x-ray equipment. Is that expensive or what? They're a high-end specialist practice talking about producing quality dentistry, and yet HICWA has closed down some of their equipment. And how will they get that equipment opened up? The only way they're going to get it opened up is to do training, to write up their protocols, to get their documentation in line, and to show HICWA, demonstrate to HICWA, because HICWA are now going to do what they call surveillance. They will be back, and they will be back for unannounced inspections. They will be back on the email saying, right, could you send me the updated risk assessment? Could you send me the updated training? So whereas that practice might have thought that compliance was going to take them time, the fact they didn't do compliance, they are tied up in knots.
Yeah.
And the surveillance on them for the next few months and years is going to be huge.
How can smaller practices stay updated with evolving regulations without feeling overwhelmed?
I always like to keep my answer simple, but this is not simple. I realise that a practice owner who's providing the dentistry, who's employing the staff, who's trying to do their finance. Remember, I don't do financial regulation. I don't do HR regulation. You've got Marguerite to give you a hand with that. The day-to-day running of a business is hard work. So how do they stay up to date with compliance? It comes back to my principle. You've got to spend a little bit of time embedding it into your practice and trust your staff to get on with it. Check them on occasions. And if when you're checking the staff, when you're doing your audits, and you check that they're actually understanding the protocols, after a while you know you can rely on them, that they will get on with it, you can trust them. The practice owner is always the responsible person. It's the person that if an inspector or a regulatory body is not happy, the practice owner ends up in the dock. But you can delegate responsibilities. I don't think it's an easy task. I think because single-handed practices and small practices are finding compliance so difficult and finding other aspects of dentistry, the business end of it, very difficult. It's one of the reasons why going into a corporate setting or going into a group setting has become very, very attractive for practices. I think that's a shame.
Yeah.
I think patients in Ireland have been very well served by private practice. I do think that there's a place for the government to come in and recognise the importance of small town dentistry, to support it, to take care of it, to give training, to give, I don't know, tax breaks. This is not my area of expertise, but I just think that somebody needs to get in to help it, because you cannot beat, in the same way as our medical GPs are essential for good primary care, our private practices are essential in rural Ireland.
Yeah. And just, changing the subject there slightly, I have a team of nurses working with me now for the last 11, 12 and 13 years.
Yes.
They provide emergency cover to general and specialist practices. But a lot of these nurses have been in the profession for many years. And, over the last number of years, they say, and I just think it's such a pity as well, that dental is becoming very impersonal. There was a time when your dentist was just as important as your doctor.
Yes.
And the senses, and it would be from, the corporates or the independents, is that the company or the practice own the patients.
Yeah. And I won't get away from corporate dentistry.
The corporates have their place.
Corporates have their place, group practices have their place, and I work very, very well with them. Where they have the edge, they're able to assign somebody to do compliance, to be the safety officer, to do the training. But as a patient and myself going to a practice, I like to go to a single-handed practice that isn't involved in a corporate. It's for that personal touch.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm old-fashioned, maybe I'm traditional.
I would be the same as well, so... Are you noticing any trends in the field that reflect changes in roles or responsibility within dental compliance due to shifts in regulations or expectations?
Well, I think just picking up that point again, that in many group practices and corporate practices, there is an understanding that somebody's got to champion compliance. Somebody's got to lead out on compliance. And that's a new role. Now, many practices have treatment coordinators, but there's an increasing emphasis on somebody being the owner for compliance also. And that role I'm beginning to see. Now, there actually are some very legal roles that are stipulated in the legislation. For example, the radiation protection officer, the lead person in decontamination, the officer who's in charge of waste management. Those roles are now being designated and recognised, so staff really realise and understand that somebody has to be responsible for it. So are roles changing? Yes, roles are changing. But I hope people are being rewarded for that. If I've taken over the role as the lead decontamination person, I should be recognised. I should be given the time to do that, the time to train myself, to educate myself. That recognition, I think, has to come also.
Okay. If you could predict one major change in dental compliance over the next few years, what would it be?
Increase in regulation. I would hope, if you gave me a wish list, what I would love to see is the government taking compliance in dentistry seriously. At the moment, there are too many regulators and statutory bodies that can visit dentistry that dentists have got to be aware of. It's a mishmash out there. Is there one place you can get information on compliance? No. Well, I have it in my head, but I have it in my head because of 30 years of experience. There is no go-to place. Other countries have one regulator and therefore one set of standards. This is what you need to do. This is what the inspector is going to look for. I would like to think that a new Dentists Act would bring a regulator for dentistry. Within dentistry, any changes I think there is going to be a shift to group practices. I think group practices, the ones I know, have kept a very personal touch. Some of the corporates have also.
Yeah.
But, and who's there to give guidance to the patient? That's a piece that's missing.
Yeah.
That really is a piece that's missing. So what's coming down the line? Increased regulation. Dentists need to understand their regulation. And I think the government needs to get their act together and do regulation properly. It is not properly done at the moment.
Okay. And you mentioned to me before that you and I are very alike in what we're trying to do in our field.
Yes.
Like, can you elaborate on that a bit more?
Well, you're an expert. You are the national expert. You're the go-to person. When you picked up the phone to me that day, I was delighted to talk to you.
And I loved your line. I went like, what a line, the national expert.
But you are. Own it. Own it. You are. Women play themselves down far too much. You look to be 100% before you actually establish yourself. You got to own the fact you are the expert. People are talking about you. They're going to you. I'm glad to hear people are talking about me because I keep independent. I like to think that people will trust me. And I like to think that if they ask me a question and I don't know it, I'll usually know where to find the information. But I'll be honest with them also.
Yeah. Well, that's the same. I don't know if many people would know. Like, they might see us as a recruitment agency. However, everyone from all sides in dental come to us for advice. And if I can't help people, I'll try and point them in the right direction. But, it's all these people coming to you as well that allows you to become like not only an expert in dental recruitment, but also an expert in the dental field.
Yeah,
so
dentistry, we're very lucky in Ireland. Dentistry is quite a small profession. Yeah. And for the most part, dentists do dentistry. But there's a place for others in that network. I have found my niche in dental compliance and in regulation and in staff training. You've found your niche in recruitment. There are other niches out there. Yeah. And we've got a little network going. I know you know a lot of people that I know. We had a cup of coffee beforehand and you mentioned some people. And there's other people that I know that I could introduce you to. But we're building up that network over time. And we're a great resource for practices. So many practices send me an email. They're not even clients of mine. And I'm happy to give that bit of information. Yeah. I know you do the same.
Yeah.
Because, we're all there to support one another. There's so many roles in dentistry. Not just being a dentist, not just being a member of the dental team.
Just changing the subject slightly, we recently launched our salary guide, and you were a principal dental surgeon for the HSE for many years. And we would experience losing many dental professionals to the public sector for fair play, flexibility, benefits, but most of all, transparency. Transparency seems to be really important to people these days. And we would experience, like many in the private sector, many dental professionals face significant pay disparities. We would meet dental nurses who might be in their in the same job for 15, maybe 20 years on minimum salary, which highlights the financial struggles that many face in the industry today. Hence, like just to give you an example, since COVID, 35% of support staff left the industry due to lack of pay and lack of appreciation. So from your experience working in the public sector, what part does offering fair play, flexibility, transparency play in attracting and retaining people in the dental profession?
Yes, I was 20 years as a principal dental surgeon. And the advantage you had when you were recruiting, let's say, dental nurses, was that there was a job description. There was the understanding of the role they were going to be going into. There was a salary structure. You have to be qualified. You have to be a qualified dental nurse to come into the health service. Even on a temporary basis, even coming in as an agency nurse, you have to be qualified. And depending then on your experience since qualification, you would know straight away what point in the salary scale you're going to go on to. Within the HSE, in all grades, there's an ascending salary scale. Some grades have more than others, and there's also what they call long service increments. So a dental nurse knows what they're going to be employed at, what their job is going to be. There's the flexibility within the HSE as well. And I know I got some really, really good nurses, very well trained nurses from private practice. And they came in, they knew what their salary was going to be. In some cases, they took a drop in salary coming to the health service. Certainly, if they'd come from specialist practices where they were very well valued and they were very well remunerated because of that, why did they come to the HSE? They knew their holidays. They could book their holidays. They knew that they were going to get maternity leave. They were
Lunch break.
Lunch, not only lunch break, a coffee break.
Yeah.
I mean, staff coming telling me that they'd worked flat out from, silly early o'clock in the morning right through to lunchtime and maybe even miss their lunch. I mean, there's you know yourself, there's legislation out there that says that that's not appropriate. We'll be very, very clear on building a 10, 15-minute coffee break into the morning session and having your lunch. I liked my lunch. I needed my lunch. I needed to get out of my office and walk around and clear my head at lunchtime. Staff needed to get out. Some of them did their grocery shopping in the supermarket, or they maybe ran other errands, or they went for a run. You need to get out and you come back fresh then. What else did staff get in the HSE? They got an opportunity for promotion. They got an opportunity for recognition. If you showed an interest in radiation as a dental nurse, I might arrange to put you on a radiation training program. If you were interested in oral health or education, there may be a role there for you. We may provide training for you. You could also maybe transfer if you were living and working in Dublin and a job came up down the country and you were moving, changing circumstances. All of those benefits. The other thing you got was support and camaraderie. Now, a difference in the HSE is that the staff can be unionised. And as a manager, that can present some challenges also that I could spend another podcast talking to you about. And that's difficult. They don't have that in the private sector. But in the private sector, then maybe are some of the staff vulnerable from the circumstances that they're working under. I won't pass judgment on that because my experience as a manager is only working in the public sector. But to come back to where we started, the public sector did recruit, did retain. There was that fairness. You knew the salary. You knew what you were on. You knew what everybody else was on also. There was no benefits. There was no bonuses. There was just, you got your maternity leave, your sick leave. You got your force majeure if you need it. And there was an understanding.
As a woman in a leadership role in dental, what advice would you give to other women to, thrive and advance in the dental field?
Well, I think women in dentistry, like a lot of women, are very hard on themselves. And we have a little bit of imposter syndrome. Get over it. Get out there and do it. Keep your work-life balance. I think that's very, very important. It's not just a job. It's about having a good life and having good supports, keeping yourself healthy, physically healthy, mentally healthy, but believe in yourself. Link with other women. Women's network groups are invaluable. And whether it's at work or whether there's a lot of networking groups out there, get out there and talk to other women in business. For dentists, for dental practice owners, women owners can feel very isolated. You talked about Sarah Jane. The breakdown in her class was 50-50, male, female. When I qualified, there was 5 girls.
Yeah. There
was 40 in the class. Well, I grew up with a crowd of guys that when somebody came into the room, they'd kind of go, "How are the men?" And you kind of go, "Hello, I'm here too." But the balance has changed. The feminization of the workforce has changed. But women are very hard on themselves. Believe in yourself. Learn from your mistakes. Never forget your mistakes. That's your self-education. There's your little gems. Many years ago, I did an MBA, a Master's in Business Administration. And that's one of the factors I took away from it. Stop being hard on yourself. Life is a learning process. You're going to get it wrong, but make sure that you remember your own mistakes and just don't make them again. But girls, women, ladies, I don't know. What's the correct phrase, Margaret? You tell me. You're the legal person. Believe in yourself and just do it. And don't be afraid of it. Grab every chance. I had some great mentors. Look for mentors. Yeah. Look for people to advise you. Never be afraid to ask. What can somebody say? You can say, "Sorry, I'm too busy." Find somebody else. Yeah. And yes, we all have doubts, but just get on with it and do it. And I have sleepless nights. I'm sure you have sleepless nights as well too. Before I go on a big job or I give a presentation or...
Before you do podcasts.
Never, never. Plug into that stress. It's not all stress is bad stress. It's good stress. If you're not getting that stress, you're bored. You know, you need to keep pushing yourself. Push your boundaries and enjoy your boundaries and celebrate. You're the expert in what you do. Go out and say it. Go out and celebrate it. Because you're doing a good job. But it took you 15 years to get there.
Yeah.
You know, my expertise has come from years and years of working in the industry, learning from colleagues, and I'm still learning. Every day I'm still learning.
Yeah. Oh yeah, same here. Always learning, always
it's
coming,
fun.
and always coming up with new ideas.
Yeah,
You know, just that's what excites you as well. You know, the ideas never stop. And before we wrap up, Jane, are there any other insights or advice you have for our listeners?
Oh gosh, I've done a lot of talking. What would I say to people? Let me come back to compliance.
Yeah.
Take your time. Break it down, step by step. Don't be afraid to fail. Don't expect to go 100%. You want to be in the middle. Listen to your staff. They have some solutions. Don't be afraid to delegate. Get your documentation together. If the regulators are finding one problem in dentistry, it's the lack of documentation. But documentation isn't a mountain of paperwork that's sitting on a shelf in a folder. Documentation is something very simple that if I want to know how I'm going to use the dental unit water lines and the protocols to go with that, that it's a one page, it's very simply written, maybe even a pictogram. Keep it simple. It's a journey. Enjoy the journey, work with your team, and always be open to listen to what's going on in other practices and with other colleagues. But just keep your eye on the fact that you're in a journey. You may never get to the arrival point, but enjoy the journey. Your practice will be safe, your patients will be safe, and you're just doing quality dentistry by being compliant. You're managing your risks. I'm going to go back and say my line again. Compliance might be expensive. It takes training, time, resources. Non-compliance, I see, is even more expensive. Don't try it.
Well, Jane, on that, thank you very much for joining me on the dental chair. You're absolutely fabulous. I'm delighted to have met you at last.
Well, it's been my pleasure to meet with you. This has been a lovely chat. And I hope it's the start of us talking to one another and helping our clients. I know we're sharing clients. That's what we're there for. We're a resource. Dentistry is lucky to have you, to have me, and those other people like us in the field there. And let's all work together because our patients are going to benefit. So thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you very much. We are now at the end of the first series of the Dental Chair. Before I go, I would like to say a big thank you to my right-hand woman, Margaret Kierans, for the time and effort she has spent in the research for the salary guide and our dental insights and trends. For all of our guests and key figures in dental who have given up their time to join us as well. And for every dental professional, whatever your role is in dental, I hope you have found each episode insightful and of benefit to you. If you have enjoyed the podcast, please like and share. This is Marguerite Morgan from Irish Dental Jobs, reminding you to treat every interaction with care and consideration because in recruitment and in life, people matter. Until the next time, slán agus beannacht.